the advantage of being the moderator is you know that the place to sit is where no one else is already sitting. That's the. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We have had conversations like this on these complex issues in a number of cities around the country, and everywhere we go, it's clear that these questions of criminal justice, equity, opportunity, and safety bring together a lot of contending interests and really give a window into what the priorities of a community are. So I want to start by asking you each a broad question. How do you define success in your job? How do you define whether what you are doing is making this community a better place to live? What are the metrics that define whether you are making this community a better place?
Well, I think, for me, there are multiple things that I'm looking for, right? Number one, I'm looking for, are we creating a more livable community? Is this a place where people can be in open spaces, people can feel free to enjoy the facilities and everything that the community has to offer? At the same time, I'm looking to the work that we're doing, and is the work that we're doing is fair and just? Are we taking into consideration what the impact, the downstream impact of our work is? So it's a balance between keeping safety, and safety, I define that more as creating livable communities. Obviously, crime has to be down. But the other is, are we doing anything that actually is doing more harm than good in the long term?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I would guess that we all have different measures of success. As public defenders, we represent about 20,000 people a year. And because we represent clients, it's very specific what we consider success, and that's freedom, for our clients. And, people say, well, how does that intersect with public safety? Our job is to effectuate the best outcome for our clients. And often, I think what that means is that we have to exercise their rights, whether it's a right to a jury trial, a right to move to suppress evidence where the constitutional rights have been violated. Public defenders, I really see our role as sort of the guardians of the justice system, to keep police, prosecutors, sheriffs honest. And it's, many times not viewed that way because public defenders are so often overworked, understaffed, overwhelmed with caseloads. In San Francisco, I think we've been very fortunate because we are staffed well. And so we're able to not only ensure that our clients' rights are effectuated, but we look at other things that are important to our clients. For example, the Clean Slate program, where we help expunge records so people can live productive lives and get back to work. Reentry programs. And I think that's where we all share a common purpose, that if the worst thing in the world as a public defender is when you see your client coming back in the door, you don't want that. And you want to be able to provide clients the support so they can live productive lives. Not that they're not already, but those who need that support and want it. And I think that's, where we all share that common goal.
Sheriff?
I would say, first of all, as a sheriff, I run the county jails. But I don't decide who comes into the county jails. For the most part. Most of the time, it's the people sitting here, including the courts, that decide and make those decisions about who I get. So success for me looks like making sure that when I have people in my custody, that I'm doing all I can to protect their rights while they're in custody, to make sure that they are getting their needs met, but also on top of that in San Francisco, making sure that we're providing programming that is specific to the needs of the people in our jails. And I see many people here today that work in the jails and do a good job in the Resolve to Stop the Violence program, Man Alive, restorative justice programs. We have a 5 Keys charter school in San Francisco. So I view that as part of my success, is having all these community CBOs come in and provide work with our staff. And measuring success, though, is a little bit difficult in terms of, on another scale, a more specific scale, lowering the number of fights in the jail, making sure that we're keeping people safe in the jail, excessive force complaints in the jail, making sure that those get investigated quickly and that we're taking appropriate action. So all these things are part of what I measure success on.
Chief?
I'll start out from a micro level, from a policing standpoint. Success for us looks like, and for me personally, looks like a fair and just police department. And that includes from the victim's point of view, that includes from the caller, the person that calls 911, from the person that is ultimately arrested. There has to be fairness and justice throughout the system. You know, we have to take care of our victims and make sure that they're made whole. And when all that's in balance, we have a good criminal justice system. On a larger scale, I think we have to be very balanced as a city and address the root causes. And success, in my view, is really getting to the root causes of a lot of the things that drive the criminal justice issues in our society and in our city. You know, the education, public health, many things that feed into criminal justice. From a larger view, they have to be put into place so we're not just addressing the symptoms. And I think when we do that well, both long-term and short-term, we're in a better place.
We'll talk about those root causes in a minute, but let me go back to one of the specific metrics of success that the community has adopted, which is reducing the population in the jail. And in fact, from the early 90s to about 2013, over 20 years, it did decline substantially from about 2,300 to about 1,300 by the fall of 2013, the average daily population. It's fluctuated some since, but it's roughly in the same place today as it was in the fall of 2013. Why did the decline slow or stop? And is it realistic to be able to achieve significant further declines as you have now committed to?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. And I will say that, you know, the jail population has declined, but the people out on pretrial diversion has gone up. So today we have 53% of people out on pretrial diversion, whereas before it was around 47 a few years ago, 45 before that, 40 before that. So what we're doing is we're ending up getting more people out on pretrial diversion, but our population is staying the same. So with 54 or 53% out on pretrial diversion, that leaves the rest of the people in jail. And the rest of the people in jail, of that group, there's a number that have no way of getting out in terms of their holds, their warrants, their acuity of the crimes that they've committed or are charged with, I should say.
What percent of the people are in jail?
89% of the people in jail are pretrial felons.
Felonies.
Felons for the most part. I would say probably portion of the 89%, I would say a couple percentage part are not felons. But, you know, it's constantly changing, moving population. The majority of people come to jail and get out within 1 or 2 days through pretrial diversion. And so it's always changing. It's a changing and very challenging group because we do have so much change going on. People that work in our jails now, we used to have about a 30% sentence population in our jails. We don't have that anymore. We have maybe 10%, and most of the sentenced people are out on alternatives to incarceration. So what you have is you have people trying to work with people when they have no idea of when people are getting out of custody, and that makes it very difficult to address.
Mr. Gascon, the city has committed 16% reduction, further reduction over the next 2 years.
Right.
It's kind of been, as we said, plateaued for several years. What will it take to achieve that kind of rapid reduction after these years of kind of running in place?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to look at. I think what the sheriff says is correct. The low-hanging fruits in San Francisco have long been gone, right? We have been moving misdemeanors. We have been moving a lot of low-level offenses out of the incarceration setting. Our population is a more challenging population, right? We have a population that is generally mentally ill, has substantial substance abuse problems. They're homeless, they're poor, and at times they could be at a place where they're dangerous. And the question for us is, how do we maneuver that? How do we find the right alternatives? What kind of programming we can find outside of the jail system? How do we increase our bed capacity for the mentally ill? You know, what are the diversion programs that we could do at the ground level with the police department? What are the diversion programs that we can do at mine level? And then even if we do proceed with the prosecution, what kind of outcomes do we seek in order to be able to make sure the person is not coming back? You know, the system continues to fail us, right? If you look at the people that are in our jail, these are people that keep coming over and over and over again. If we were in any other system, if I told you to go buy a car and I tell you that you have a 50, 70% likelihood that your car is not going to start the following morning, you probably won't buy it. But you spend millions and millions of dollars in the criminal justice system that continues to fail over and over again. We need to do things differently.
Can I ask you, Mr. Alge, is it not unusual, as you go to communities around the country, to have a disparity between the racial composition of the people who are incarcerated and the racial composition of the community as a whole? But here, it is especially severe. African Americans are, I think, 5% now down to of the population of the city, but about half of the total jail population. How does it get so disparate?
Actually, it's more than half. I mean, our numbers are worse than Ferguson when you look at San Francisco. And recently did a study on this, and it shows that the racial disparity, and James Bell has done a lot of work in this area, starts from the time of arrest on the street, and it continues throughout the system. And not only are people of color arrested more often for offenses like drug offenses, but they're also charged with more serious crimes and more crimes. Even compared to people with the same backgrounds or criminal histories. The one thing I wanted to mention that no one mentioned is the elimination of money bail. And, most of the people who are in custody are there because they cannot afford it.
Is that literally true? Are a majority of the
There are about 300 people in jail that have a bail of $50,000 or more that are still in custody.
And that would solve
that do not have any other holds.
20%. That would bring 20% if we did that. And we're trying to work on that. We have a case, People versus Humphrey, where we challenge this from the California Supreme Court. There's SB 10, which would eliminate money bail, which is now going to be caught up because the bail industry is challenging that.
And we're going to talk more about that later, by the way. But I want to ask both of you about that as well. But Chief, the public defender raised the issue of basically disparate treatment at each step of the process in the criminal justice system for people of color. You see the same statistics. What do you make of it, and how have you tried to deal with it within the department?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we really have to do the research and understand what we have. And I've seen the statistics that the public defender has raised, but we really need to understand what we have. And it gets back to what I said earlier about root causes. I mean, there are things in policing that need to be addressed in terms of addressing the disparities. But there are also things that I think we have to address as a society, including our city, in terms of root causes. I mean, when you look at the victim rate in this city of homicides, and we went back and looked at 10 years of homicides, the majority of the victims are people of color. And, that tells another story. So all of that, I think, is relevant to this point. We really have to really understand why we do what we do, and these disparity numbers, I think a lot of them are rooted in many issues that are long before any of us sitting on the stage. But moving forward, there are things that we do as a police department, including implicit bias training, procedural justice training, that I think will change that narrative moving forward. And we're already seeing some good results with that, but we have a lot of work to do. And researchers are part of this equation, academic researchers, so we can really understand what we have here.
Another population that everywhere is disproportionately present in jails are those dealing with mental illness, as you alluded to before. And I think you've said 40% have sought some kind of treatment. To what extent are there options? Obviously, any strategy to try to further reduce the population would focus on diverting more of those people into more appropriate treatment. Does the treatment exist?
And that is a problem. We don't, right? We have people that are often waiting 4 months for a service bed. And we have people that are not even diagnosed, right? We recently did a study of our own workload in our office, and we determined that 91% of the people that we have dealt with have some level of trauma. And most of that is untreated trauma. And even when we provide treatment, sometimes we're misdiagnosing what the treatment ought to be. So the reality is that the population that we all deal with is population that needs, they're in needs of a great deal of support and different types of services that are not available. Usually the mentally ill will stay in jail longer than other people, whether it's because of services or because they're not getting the right support. These are areas that we have to address. I think also it's important to distinguish between disproportionality and disparate treatment. We had the Public Policy Institute did a very deep dive in the work of the district attorney's office. For instance, they found no disparity, but they found huge disproportionality, right? And when you're talking about disproportionality, then you have to go deeper into the system and figure out what is going on, right? Our white population, by and large, is becoming wealthier and more educated, is enlarging. Our minority population, especially African American, Latino population, is shrinking. They're mostly less educated, they're poor, and consequently, there's a different set of circumstances that often end up in the criminal justice system. I think that the problem is that sometimes we're trying to apply very simplistic solutions to problems that are very complicated. The issue of bail is an interesting problem, right? Both Jeff and I agree we're against money bail. As a matter of fact, I was the first one that talked about bringing the Arnold tool to the city in 2011. But then the question that we have to ask ourselves is there a place for pretrial detention if people are dangerous, right? And this is what we depart, right? Jeff believes that only people that have committed basically what would be amount to a capital crime, which we don't seek the death penalty here, but it would have to be a death penalty level case or a very serious sex assault case that deserves pretrial detention because he believes that the presumption of innocence is greater than public safety. I have a more nuanced approach to this. I think there are people that may not reach to the level of committing a capital crime or a serious sexual offense, but there are people that at that point in time are dangerous, and the question is, can we detain those people on a pretrial setting, not based on their capacity to pay for bail, but based on the capacity of harming others? And that is, quite frankly, that's actually the distinction between our two arguments, and that
the
will
state
be
Supreme
what the
Court is...
will be deciding that.
Well, I would just disagree
Yeah.
with one thing you said.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if he didn't.
I believe that there should be a presumption of release, and that's consistent with the
Right.
presumption of innocence. And the problem with the so-called reform that's been, I think pushed on the people by the Judicial Council and the governor, because the original bail reform would have provided, for a process before a person could be detained. What I don't like about, the way that the system would work if it was implemented is that it essentially would keep people, even charged with misdemeanors, in custody indefinitely under this idea of preventative detention. The idea that, somebody might commit a crime, and so we'll keep them locked up. And to me, the judges have created much of the problem because we see the same bias, the high bails. I mean, the case that we're litigating, there was a $600,000 bail set for this man, Kenneth Humphrey. And that's outrageous. I mean, it wasn't based on his income, his ability to pay, none of that. They simply slapped a number on him, and of course, he stayed in custody.
Just to be clear, although you're on opposite sides of this lawsuit, do both of you oppose the referendum to repeal SB 10 that the bail industry is now? Do you support the referendum, or do you oppose the referendum?
Opposed.
You oppose the referendum?
I oppose the referendum. I'm also supportive of no money bail, and I agree with Jeff that the presumption should be released, but that has to be in light of what is the public safety risk, right? Even the case that we are both in opposite ends of the spectrum, we look at it through a very different lens, right? He's looking at it, this man stole $5. We look at it through a lens of a person that was a three-striker. The only thing that the person had that could be stolen was $5, but a very fragile victim. And there was violence involved in that.
I want to get to one other big area.
He's doing great.
Sheriff,
Well,
do you have an opinion on the...
you guys are with him every day.
Sheriff, do you have what is
If we
your
could get
view-
that level of supervision, we'll eliminate
Yeah.
recidivism right off the
There you
bat.
go.
Sheriff, your view on SB 10 and the effort to repeal?
Well, first of all, I am against money bail, so I don't think there should be, I don't even know why we have money bail. I think, but I am very much in favor of the pretrial release program we currently have in San Francisco, which would be abolished by SB 10. So I'm not exactly in favor of SB 10 because I don't like what they did. As Jeff said, not today, but he said it before. Basically, this was done behind closed doors.
So as Bill Clinton might have said, mend it, don't end it. That would be your view? So let me turn to a broader question, because these issues, as we said, are very complex. A lot of different considerations come together. But one in many communities, one issue overshadows all others, and that is when unarmed civilians are killed by law enforcement officers. And you have certainly had your share of those major controversies here in recent years. I want to ask each of you, and maybe start with you, Mr. Public Defender, your view of the current system in San Francisco to evaluate and decide on those cases.
It's broken. I mean, how can you not prosecute the officers who shot and assassinated Mario Woods? I mean, I know there's been a lot of heat on that, but I mean, look at the cases that have piled up, you know, one after the other. And the idea that somehow we're not going to hold our police officers accountable, even the racist text message scandal, that finally, what is it, 3 years later, you know, they're finally facing discipline. When I think that citizens hear about that and they see it, because you see it on social media, you see it on smartphones captured, because this has been going on for a long time. It's not a recent phenomenon. People become outraged. And, you know, these charging decisions, police officers take years. If it were you or I, we'd be arrested and locked up, you know, within a matter of hours. But when it comes to police, there is a different standard. There's a different standard that's applied by law enforcement, by prosecutors, by police departments. And, you know, the system of laws that we have in California, we have one of the most protective police officers' Bill of Rights. These are rights that no other, civil service employee would have.
Police are certainly in a different position than most of us in the way they spend their days and the situations they're exposed to. So I want to ask, Chief, your view about the system for evaluating these occurrences and the extent to which police feel as though they have a clear sense of what they can and can't do.
Yeah, so first of all, the system does need to be improved. But there are a couple of things that are important that I think really get us into trouble in today's world. Number one, sound bites flash across the news and people make judgments about these cases without having any information. There's only, and that's a transparency issue. In California, the laws will change January 1st and these cases will be open, and people, through public records requests, people will be able to have access to these investigations. When a prosecutor or even a police chief has to evaluate these cases, we have to evaluate based on the facts. And oftentimes what gets out in the news is not factual, it's spin, sound bites, innuendo, speculation. That's not evidence. Mm-hmm. And when I spoke earlier about fairness, we have to be fair to all, police officers as well. You know, this is a very, very difficult job. We get second-guessed on almost everything that we do. All we ask for is fairness. And when the facts are out and people make their judgments, make them on facts. Not what you see on Fox News, not what you see on, you pick the news channel. And that's a problem in our society. And it's really skewed this issue, in my view, to an unacceptable level because it's not fair for anyone.
Mr. Attorney?
Well, I think, you know, probably the only piece that I agree with Jeff here is that the system needs to be changed, number one. And number two, the police officers get treated differently. And you know what? Guess what? They do. The law actually provides a different set of lenses when you look at police use of force. And that is a struggle that we go through all the time. That's why my office and I personally supported the attempt to reform the laws around
this is the legislation from Kevin McCarty and
correct.
Shirley Weber, which would change the standard.
Exactly. But what I find troubling, especially from trained attorneys that may not understand the law or are not looking at all the facts behind the case, as the Chief indicated, is to say that a prosecutor somehow, especially prosecutors are doing the work in earnest, and are doing the job without looking at the law and looking at the evidence. When you have a person, look, I'll give you a for instance, you will find horrifying, I know that we do, but most people don't know this. There is a fleeing felon law in the state of California. If you commit a robbery and you're running away from the police and the police shoots you in the back, that per se is a lawful shooting in California. If Jeff shoots at a robber as he's running away, we will prosecute Jeff immediately successfully. The laws are different. When you have an incident where a police officer believes that he or she is being threatened, and you have somebody that has committed a preceding crime, it is very difficult to go through the standard of the law and show, because of the presumption of innocence, And because we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person has committed a crime, it is very difficult to prove these cases or even to be able to do a case that will stand the scrutiny of a simple preliminary hearing.
Sheriff, your view on the standards and the process?
Well, thankfully, and I cross my fingers that we haven't had one of these happen in our department, but I agree with what the district attorney is saying and what Jeff is saying. I mean, everybody's saying pretty much, and what the chief is saying. I mean, I think that there's a method of training officers that promotes that kind of conduct as well, and I think that's something that I know the chief here is addressing and that I'm trying to address. But I think nationwide there needs to be another look at how we train our officers as well.
I want to ask a real quick and then bring in the audience. I want to ask you a question. You know, under the Obama administration, the Justice Department did an extensive analysis of the police department with many critical recommendations. The Justice Department under President Trump has made clear it is out of the business of trying to reform the way police departments operate. Does that make it harder to advance change inside of the department to have that external source of pressure eliminated?
Not for me and not for us. I mean, we shouldn't have to be forced to do the right thing. And even after there was a change of heart in the administration and they got out of that business of collaborative reform, because that's what our reform program was. It was a collaborative agreement. We decided to keep going with this work. And we shouldn't have to be forced, as leaders in this profession, we shouldn't have to be forced to look at our practices, our policies, and say we need to do better. And that's what we've elected.
Does it make it tougher to build consensus within all the constituencies within the union, for example, without having that external force?
No, it doesn't make it tougher. Because, number one, we have the support of you know, our elected officials here in the city. We have the support of our officers, and we know there are things that we can do better. And we agreed to do the recommendations that were given to us by the U.S. Department of Justice, and it's going to make us a better police department. So, no.
Let's go to the audience. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Gloria Berry, founder of Berry Powerful Ladies. We're constantly told that the Bill of Rights protects police officers from murdering citizens. What specifically in the Bill of Rights does protect them for that, and how do we as taxpayers get that changed? And why does the Sheriff's Department have any oversight like the San Francisco PD? And why isn't there a body camera policy for the Sheriff's Department, and you're asking for $400,000 more for it? And why aren't the sheriffs using it even though the taxpayers are paying for it?
Multiple questions.
So,
Body, go ahead.
Okay.
Let me take the first part of your question. The Bill of Rights does not protect officers when they commit crimes. There are other laws that do. What the Bill of Rights does is it precludes the transparency of the discipline process. In fact, even for prosecutors, it's very difficult for us sometimes to get a hold of an officer's work history, because one of the things that we look when we're evaluating a shooting, not only are we evaluating the facts as they were presented to us, but we're also trying to assess the history of the officer. Sometimes it can take us 3 or 4 months to get a whole history of the officer. Sometimes we have to go to a grand jury to get the officer's work history. So that is a problem. It's a block. It's a block that prevents transparency. It's a block that prevents sometimes the chief of police from being open to the community. But the issue of use of force is a different one, and it's one that we tried to address last year. And it failed. And it failed because, you know, quite frankly, police unions came out and the legislators pulled back. The standard of proof that you have to look at an officer's use of force in order to be able to prove that a crime has committed is a very high standard. In most cases, it's almost impossible because police officers on duty are the only people in our society that are authorized by law to carry a weapon and to use deadly force if they feel that is necessary. And that's why they're looked upon differently. That's why Jeff is right. If one of us were to use force and kill someone, we would be looked upon differently than a police officer that is on duty.
And Body.
So the law.
Body.
I'm sorry?
So we're not all equal under the Constitution?
You're not when it comes to an on-duty police officer. That is correct.
Yeah. Body cameras. Police department here in the city now. Sheriff,
Okay, well, we started a pilot program last year with 30 body cameras. We got 30 body cameras, and we've been using them on the 7th floor of the Hall of Justice, which is the old jail, the linear style jail, where we have limited camera ability. And we did a pilot program, and we found that the body cameras worked very, very well. And in fact, we can say that it reduced uses of force, it improved behavior on both the side of the deputy sheriffs as well as the inmates in our jail. We have now ordered another large group of body cameras, and that's the 400,000 you're talking about. We have not received those yet. And in the meantime, we will be using our pilot program, assessing that, and creating a policy. It's going to be about 6 months before we get those additional cameras.
Maybe it's kind of a closing word, Chief, Mr. Adachi. Can you talk about the impact of the body cameras on what impact it's had, you believe, on the police department here?
Yeah, better transparency for sure. I think it's made us better. You know, we have a policy on the San Francisco Police Department, particularly in an officer-involved shooting. Our policy is pretty clear. If the release of the body-worn camera footage does not jeopardize anyone's safety, if it doesn't jeopardize any privacy laws, and if it doesn't compromise the investigations, we release it. And we've been very consistent about that. We want the public to know the facts as much as we can release that won't hurt the investigation. And I think that's done us a world of good in terms of the public actually seeing what we do. We have nothing to hide. You know, we want to do our jobs the right way. We have nothing to hide, and the public needs to see it. We need to be held accountable, but you know, we have to have fairness in the system. Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the Police Officer Bill of Rights question.
Yes.
The problem, okay, with the Police Officer Bill of Rights is it protects officers who commit misconduct, even those that are found guilty of misconduct. And there's been a slight change, a new law that's going to allow at least public disclosure of some information relating to police officers. What happens is that you have officers who are committing misconduct, who are even getting fired from other police departments, and they get rehired at other police departments because that information is not known. The other thing I wanted to say is, you know, take a specific case, Mario Woods. Nobody here has said that was wrong, what happened to that young man.
That's incorrect. I said it publicly that it was morally wrong. I also said that it was
as long as
lawful.
that kind of practice is upheld and police officers are not prosecuted, it's going to continue to happen again.
We have to
All right,
change the law.
We could clearly keep going, but we have to surrender the stage to the next round. So join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's
all right.
incorrect. I said it very publicly.
We're going to go that way.
Don't worry.
Steve, thank you so much.